When George Gurdjieff interrupted a conference in Paris in 1922 with a statement that horrified the audience, no one imagined that those words would forever change our understanding of human consciousness. "You are all dead," he declared, looking into the eyes of every person present. "You are walking corpses who have not yet realized that you have stopped living." For 40 years, Gurdjieff had studied a phenomenon that modern psychology refused to recognize. He traveled through monasteries in Tibet, secret schools in Afghanistan, and Sufi communities in Central Asia, always pursuing the same disturbing question: why do most people only wake up to life when they are about to lose it? But it was only when he witnessed a specific event in 1896, a moment of exactly 8 minutes that changed his life, that Gurdjieff discovered the most terrifying truth about the human condition. George Gurdjieff was never just a philosopher. He was a hunter of truths that no one wanted to hear. Born in 1866 on the border between Armenia and Turkey, from a young age he observed something disturbing in the people around him. They lived in a state of automatism so profound that they did not even realize they were not truly alive. Gurdjieff spent decades trying to understand this mechanics of human unconsciousness. But then he understood something revolutionary. The great revelations about human nature do not happen in moments of peace. They happen when death knocks at the door and tears off the mask we all wear. It was in October 1896 when Gurdjieff witnessed the incident that would change everything. He was in a monastery in the Himalayan mountains, where he had been accepted after months of insistence. That fateful afternoon, a monk named Sogyal was in deep meditation when he suddenly began to scream. "Forced awakening in progress," the abbot whispered to Gurdjieff. "Watch closely. This happens once every decade." Gurdjieff looked at his watch. It was exactly 3:17 p.m. Over the next 8 minutes, he would witness something that Western science would take a century to begin to comprehend. That night, Gurdjieff could not sleep. He knew he had witnessed something extraordinary. During his subsequent investigation, he realized that those 8 minutes of forced awakening were not just a mystical phenomenon. They were evidence of something much more disturbing about human nature. Gurdjieff never forgot the day he finally understood what happened in those 8 minutes. That's when he had the epiphany. Human beings do not live sleeping occasionally. They live in deep sleep all the time, waking up only in rare moments of extreme shock. To understand what Gurdjieff discovered, we need to go back to that October afternoon in 1896. The monk Sogyal had collapsed after a vision during meditation. According to the accounts Gurdjieff collected later, Sogyal had seen his own death in vivid detail. At 3:17 p.m., according to Gurdjieff's precise notes, something happened that no psychology treatise of the time had documented. Sogyal did not just wake up from his trance. He woke up from his entire life. "I was dead," Sogyal repeated, trembling. "For 43 years, I was dead and didn't know it." It was the perfect moment for denial, exactly as happens with most people who face their mortality. But Gurdjieff discovered that in that moment of absolute existential terror, Sogyal experienced something that would change not only his life but Gurdjieff's understanding of all humanity. He truly awakened. He did not run from reality. He did not rationalize. Instead, at 3:19 p.m., just 2 minutes after the collapse, he said something that Gurdjieff noted word for word: "I wasted every second. Every breath was an insult to life." Gurdjieff realized that this statement was not just emotional. It was evidence of a radical cognitive transformation. Sogyal had bet everything on something no one had attempted before, living as if every moment were his last, because he finally understood that it was. During his subsequent research, Gurdjieff understood that those 8 minutes revealed the true secret of human consciousness. It was not about meditation or spiritual practices. It was about the revolutionary understanding that we live in a state of collective hypnosis, where the perception of death is more powerful than any other tool for awakening. If you act as if you are immortal, you become a zombie. If you acknowledge your mortality, you become human. At 3:23 p.m., just 6 minutes after the initial collapse, something extraordinary happened. Sogyal, who had spent decades in spiritual practices without ever truly awakening, suddenly began to see the world with a clarity that frightened even the most experienced monks. Gurdjieff discovered in later reports that they could not comprehend what was happening. How could someone change so radically in so little time? That's when Gurdjieff had his greatest revelation. He found in the monastery abbot's own diaries a note made 3 days after the incident: Sogyal is no longer the same man. It is as if he died and was reborn. He sees what we pretend to see. Gurdjieff never imagined that this discovery would lead him to completely rewrite his understanding of human consciousness. Those 8 minutes in the monastery were not about spiritual enlightenment. They were about the brutal psychology of awakening. Sogyal had discovered something that Gurdjieff would take 30 years to fully articulate. It was 2 a.m. when George Gurdjieff finally understood the true meaning of those 8 minutes. He was in his office in Moscow, surrounded by hundreds of documents on similar cases he had collected around the world, when the epiphany hit him like lightning. Sogyal had not just awakened in the monastery. He had proven that human beings live in a state of sleep so profound that only the proximity of death can break it. Gurdjieff realized that in those 8 minutes, Sogyal demonstrated that truly conscious human beings are not those who never sleep. They are those who transform the moment of forced awakening into a permanent state of vigilance. Gurdjieff discovered something even more disturbing in his subsequent studies. He documented 127 cases of people who went through near-death experiences or deep existential shocks. In all cases, there was an identical pattern. I finally woke up, a drowning survivor wrote in his diary. I discovered I had spent 30 years sleeping with my eyes open. Life began the day I almost died, another noted. Gurdjieff understood that those 8 minutes in the monastery were not just an isolated incident. They were evidence of a universal psychological law: humanity lives in deep sleep until death violently shakes it. It was at this moment in Gurdjieff's career that he grasped the deepest truth about consciousness. Truly awakened people are not born ready. They are forged in the fire of the most impossible moment, the direct confrontation with their own mortality. And Sogyal had been forged in exactly 8 minutes of absolute existential terror. Gurdjieff never forgot that moment of revelation. He realized he had spent decades studying philosophy, religion, spiritual practices. But he had missed the most important element: the exact moment in a sleep human transforms into a truly conscious being. During his research, Gurdjieff discovered that those 8 minutes in the monastery explained everything that came after. His school in Fontainebleau, his methods of intentional shocks, his self-remembering exercises. Gurdjieff had become obsessed with artificially replicating what Sogyal had experienced naturally, creating situations that would force people to wake up before it was too late. When George Gurdjieff finally presented his discovery about the 8 minutes of forced awakening in his lectures, the intellectual community of Paris was shocked. Psychologists and philosophers who had studied consciousness for decades realized they had missed the most defining moment of all human existence. I spent 30 years looking for the secret of consciousness in sacred books, Gurdjieff admitted years later. But the real secret was hidden in 8 minutes of terror that everyone preferred to ignore. That discovery transformed not only Gurdjieff's career but the entire modern understanding of human consciousness. He had proven that moments of existential crisis do not destroy people. They reveal them in their true sleeping nature. Today, in psychology schools around the world, Sogyal's 8 minutes of forced awakening are studied as the perfect example of radical consciousness transformation. Gurdjieff had discovered that humans are not conscious beings who occasionally sleep. They are sleepwalkers who occasionally wake up. Gurdjieff visited that monastery in the Himalayas dozens of times after his discovery. He would often stay in the exact spot where Sogyal had collapsed, trying to feel what the monk had felt in those crucial 8 minutes. Sogyal was not a traditional spiritual genius, Gurdjieff wrote in his memoirs. He was something much rarer, a man who had discovered how to stay awake through the absolute refusal to forget that he was going to die. In the final years of his life, George Gurdjieff often said that those 8 minutes in the monastery taught him more about human nature than decades of academic study. Sogyal had discovered something that transcended spirituality: how to transform the moment of collapse into the moment of transformation. Gurdjieff's discovery about the 8 minutes of forced awakening revolutionized not only psychology but our entire understanding of consciousness in crisis. Executives, athletes, artists, all study that moment when Sogyal chose to wake up when everyone expected him to go into denial. Gurdjieff spent the rest of his career exploring the implications of that discovery. He had found definitive proof that humans are not naturally conscious. They have developed an extraordinary ability to live on autopilot, waking up only when death dangerously approaches. But Gurdjieff went further. He did not just document the phenomenon. He created methods to force awakening before actual death. "You must die before you die," he tirelessly repeated to his students. "Because if you wait for physical death, it will be too late to live." His techniques were brutal and controversial. He created situations of extreme stress, public embarrassment, emotional confrontations. Everything designed to replicate those 8 minutes that transformed Sogyal. "People hate me for waking them up," Gurdjieff once said. "But I hate them for preferring to sleep." Gurdjieff documented that out of every 100 people exposed to his shock methods, only 3 truly woke up. Most returned to deep sleep as soon as the discomfort passed. "They prove my theory," he wrote. "Humanity prefers death and life to life with consciousness of death." Sogyal's case haunted him until his last days. Gurdjieff discovered that the monk lived another 47 years after that forced awakening, and according to all accounts, never returned to psychological sleep. He had become one of the rare truly awakened people. Sogyal died conscious, the abbot wrote to Gurdjieff in 1943. "Unlike 99% of humanity who die without ever having lived." But Gurdjieff's most disturbing discovery was not about those who awaken. It was about the vast majority who do not awaken. He documented thousands of cases of people who had their own near-death experiences, their own moments of existential shock. And he found that most of them returned to deep sleep within weeks. "The human being is a machine programmed to forget its mortality," Gurdjieff concluded. And in this purposeful amnesia, he lives as a living dead man. Gurdjieff spent the last years of his life writing about what he called the tragedy of sleeping humanity. He had proven that consciousness is not our natural state. It is a rare achievement, reached only by those who refuse to return to sleep after being brutally awakened. "Observe the people around you," he wrote. "They talk, work, marry, have children. But how many are really present in their own lives? How many are not just executing a program?" The answer Gurdjieff found was terrifying: less than 1%. He created a concept that shocked his contemporaries: humanity is not composed of conscious individuals. It is composed of biological machines that occasionally simulate consciousness. "You believe you think," he told his students. "But you don't think. Thoughts happen in you like digestion. You believe you feel. But you don't feel. Emotions pass through you like the weather. You believe you act. But you don't act. You are acted upon by forces you don't even perceive." During his final lectures in Paris, already old and weak, Gurdjieff performed a demonstration that left his audience in disturbing silence. He asked someone in the audience to raise their hand. When the person raised it, he asked, "Did you decide to raise your hand or did the hand raise itself?" Most laughed, thinking it was a joke. But Gurdjieff was absolutely serious. "Test yourselves," he insisted. "Observe every action, every thought, every emotion. Ask, who is doing this? And you will have to admit the terrifying truth: no one is doing it. It is being done." It was this radical understanding that separated Gurdjieff from all other thinkers of his time. He was not offering spiritual comfort. He was diagnosing a collective illness that humanity refused to acknowledge. "You are sleeping," he repeated. "And the only difference between you and a corpse is that you still move." Gurdjieff developed specific exercises to test a person's level of sleep. The most famous was the stop exercise. He would command stop in the middle of an activity, and his students had to freeze immediately, observing their own minds. "When you freeze the body," he explained, "you can finally see the machine in operation. Thoughts continue. Emotions flow. Tensions appear. All without you. but the exercise that most revealed humanity's deep sleep was what he called self-remembering. Gurdjieff asked students to try to be aware of themselves while performing everyday activities. Walking and knowing you are walking. Eating and being present while eating. Talking and hearing your own words. Most could not maintain this awareness for more than seconds. You disappear, Gurdjieff observed. You believe you are present, but you are not. The character is acting, but you, the real consciousness, are asleep. In the last months of his life, Gurdjieff became obsessed with one final question: how many people die without ever having lived a single conscious moment? He estimated, based on his 40 years of observation, that 95% of humanity lives and dies in deep sleep. They are born asleep, live asleep, and die asleep, he wrote in his final diary. The only difference is that some have more interesting nightmares than others. Gurdjieff's last lecture, given 3 weeks before his death in October 1949, was a brutal ultimatum to humanity. You came here expecting me to teach you how to live, he said, his voice weak but penetrating. But I cannot teach you how to live. I can only show you that you are dead. Awakening is your responsibility. He looked at the silent audience and asked the question that would echo for decades: how many of you will wake up only when it is too late? Gurdjieff died as he lived, completely awake. His last students reported that until his last breath, he maintained that rare quality of total presence that he had discovered in Sogil decades earlier. He was there, one of them wrote. Until the end, he was truly there. Not like us, who are absent even when present. Gurdjieff's legacy is not his techniques or exercises. It is the brutal truth he refused to sugarcoat: you are sleeping. That report on Sogil's 8 minutes, which Gurdjieff meticulously preserved, still exists in his students' archives. But its true importance is not on the paper. It is in the lesson George Gurdjieff extracted from it: truly alive humans are not defined by their successes, but by their refusal to return to sleep after being awakened. Sogil proved he could wake up in 8 minutes. Gurdjieff proved to be a genius by understanding those 8 minutes. And us? We have the opportunity to apply this transformative lesson to our own lives. Because all of us have our 8 minutes coming. The question is, when they arrive, will you wake up like Sogil, or will you hit the snooze button like 99% of humanity? Will you live before you die, or will you die without ever having lived? Death is coming for you. Not eventually. Now. With every second you spend reading this, you are 1 second closer to the end. The question Gurdjieff left us is not whether we will die. It is whether we will wake up before then. If George Gurdjieff's obsessive journey into the brutal truth about human consciousness has touched you as much as it has touched millions around the world, subscribe to the channel to discover more explosive revelations that forever changed our understanding of consciousness, mortality, and human nature. And tell us in the comments, what was your 8-minute moment that forced you to wake up? Or are you still sleeping, sleepwalking toward your own funeral?